let's talk about me Christianity. If you were born between the 80s and the 90s, I'd like to ask you a question today. A few years ago, some sociologists did some research into religious people, and they basically concluded that generally people born in the 80s and the 90s, they believe in something that they termed moralistic therapeutic deism. People who believe in God believe in these 5 things that I'd like to share with you, and I want to ask you if you agree with it, if this is something that you believe as a Christian, wherever you may find yourself. Let's talk about the first one just quickly. This is what they say people believe. A God exists who created and ordered the world and watches over human life on earth. Do you believe that? Well, I believe that. I think that's fairly true, that there is a God, that He created the world, that He watches over human earthly life. But I think He's more than that. I think that He is actually involved in what we do, and I think He's involved in our hearts, and He lives in us through His Spirit. So I'd add to that, but I think we can get away with that one. If you agree with that, then I think it's great. The second thing that they said that most people believe from this millennial generation, and maybe some parts of the generation before that, is that God wants people to be good and nice and fair to each other, as taught in the Bible and by most world religions. Do you believe that? I think that's pretty accurate. I think that God wants us to be good to each other, and I think that God wants us to love our neighbor as ourselves. I don't really have a problem with that. But the next 3 I've got a little bit of a beef with, and I'd like to ask you, what do you think about it? And number 3 is this. The central goal of life is to be happy and to feel good about yourself. You see, it's about me. It's the mentality that my faith is about me, and that God wants me to be happy. And the goal of my life is to feel good about me. That's why there's a lot of talk in modern churchianity about you, and that God is for you, He's not against you, and that God wants you to be happy, and you need to be true to yourself. So it's a very me Christianity. If you go to the wisest man that ever lived, the great King Solomon, he wrote a whole book about what the purpose of life is, and at the end of it, he spent 40 years, he spent all of his money to try and figure out what is worthwhile to do in life. And he concluded with the following. I'm going to read it for you. It's Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. He said the following: Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Isn't that interesting? And then the question that might come to your mind is, well, what are the commandments of God? Well, the commandment of God is this: love. Very simply, it's love. And let's talk about love just for a moment. The central goal of life is to love. And here's the thing about love. Love is not selfish. Love is not about you. It's not about me. It's about the other guy. Love makes other people feel good. Love is always concerned about the guy next to you and not you. Love is not selfish. And in the end, yes, when you do love people, you feel good about yourself, because that's what love does, right? So I don't fully agree with this idea that the central goal of life is to be happy and to just focus on yourself, and it's about you feeling good about yourself. Let's look at point number 4 just quickly. God does not need to be particularly involved in a person's life, except when God is needed to resolve a problem. You see, once again here, this is me religion. This is me Christianity. God exists to give me what I want. So when I have a problem, then I go to God. We call this the ATM God mentality. You don't go to an ATM to go take a picture with the ATM or because you love the ATM, right? You only go to an ATM when you need cash. Okay? And similarly, many people, they only go to God when they want something, when they're struggling, when they're going through a difficult time, when they go through a divorce. That's the time that they run to God. They never go to God when things are good. They go to God because they want something. And the reason, ladies and gentlemen, why many of us battle with faith is because we want what God can give us, but we don't want God. We want what is in God's hand, but we don't want to take God's hand. It's like going to visit your parents only when you need some bucks. You go visit them when you need something. You never go visit because you actually love them and you value your relationship with them. Let me remind you that heaven is about a person, not just about the place. That Jesus said to some people, many will come to me on that day and say, Lord, Lord, did we do all of these things in your name? And I will say to them, away from me, you evildoers, for I never knew you. And that word knew indicates a relationship with Him. Heaven is reserved for people who's got a relationship with God, who actually wants to take His hand and not just take what is in His hand. The psalmist said it so beautiful in Psalm 73, verse 25 to 26, where the psalmist asked the question, "Who have I in heaven but you? And earth has nothing I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." And what the psalmist is teaching us is this: the only thing that is the most valuable thing for him in this life is to have the hand of God and to have God in his life. The fifth point is this: good people go to heaven when they die. That's what many people out there believe. Do you believe that? Good people go to heaven when they die. Once again, it is about me being good enough to go to heaven. And it's not about Jesus paying the price for me to go to heaven. It's about me being good enough to go to heaven. Here's the problem. Jesus said nobody's good. That's the words of Jesus. Nobody's good. And if nobody's good, then nobody goes to heaven. Good people don't go to heaven, ladies and gentlemen, because there are no good people. Do you know who goes to heaven? Forgiven people do. You see, God is so holy and God is so sinless that none of us will ever be good enough to get into His presence. And the only way that we can become sinless is by accepting the sacrifices of the only person that ever lived that was sinless and that made a sacrifice to pay for our transgression. That's the only way, and that is through Christ. So me religion says I can be good enough to go to heaven. Me religion says that I only have to go to God when I need something. Me religion says Christianity, my faith, is all about me being happy and about me feeling good about myself. So, 3 things I'd like to give you. Don't follow God so you can be happy and feel better about yourself. It's not about you. Serve people and honor God. Make it about others. Make it about Him. And then you'll find true happiness, true joy. Number 2, stop using God. Stop asking God for what you want and start asking God for what He wants. And lastly, you will never be good enough. Just deal with it. Let it settle in. You'll never be good enough to make it to heaven. Rather trust Jesus.